Hello, my name is Nancy Love, and I'm making this video not only on behalf of the Planet Peace Project, which is usually why I make videos. I'm making this video on behalf of the planet and all the children hereupon. I noticed in the Academy Awards last night. Yes, I watched the whole darn thing, and in spite of the fact that I'm a really busy person, I enjoyed the heck out of it, and I would like to congratulate all the winners and all the nominees. It's a beautiful production. But I noticed something pretty darn peculiar, and I want to address that. Several people not only thank their own parents and their cohorts and colleagues in their endeavors, they thanked all the mommies of the world because one said, if it weren't for the mommies, we wouldn't be here. Yeah, that's the problem I have with mommies. First of all, you wonder why adults who are intelligent enough and coherent enough and articulate enough to win an Oscar for whatever reason can't use a more adult word like mothers. Why are they calling them mommies? That's kind of weird. But seriously, no, seriously, grow up. They're mothers, not mummies. And but second of all, why on God's green earth would anybody with any kind of brain cells thank all the mothers of the world? Are you insane? What part of infestation haven't you noticed? When I was a kid, there were approximately 4 billion people on this planet. Now there are approximately 8 billion. And one of the single stable statistics, which is abhorrent and disgusting and shouldn't be, is that for the whole time I've been alive, approximately 25,000 people have starved all the way to death of either hunger directly or hunger related illnesses every 24 hours. So we're losing 25,000 people, usually more than half of them children. Obviously, like 13,000 children starving to death every day, every 24-hour period. And if we're such an intelligent species and all the mommies of the world should be credited with anything, no, no, no. We are not the highest form of life on this world. A higher form of life with the ability to uh, create and utilize science and knows what math is and knows what an exponential population growth is. If you know, statistically speaking, what a J curve is, that it took millions of years for the human population to get to 4 billion, but then it's exponentially increasing. And a J curve is when something starts slow and then just goes exponential, and the curve that is plotting these indices goes straight up. We're in a J curve with population, and population J curve is the single most obvious reason for climate change, rampant pollution, probably war over scarce resources, drought, all of these problems that human beings have promulgated upon the face of this poor, precious garden we call Earth are directly related to overpopulation. Stop thanking the mothers of the world and start asking them to get some birth control. Stop it. Stop being mothers so that the world itself can survive. If we can't feed 25,000 people and they die of hunger on a planet where people throw away billions and billions of food every day, we're doing everything wrong. We're not a smart species. We are stupid because we can't feed our own, and we're letting babies starve to death in their starving mother's arms while we have more babies than we have in prosperous countries for things like called fertility clinics. My God, We don't need any fertility clinics. If you want a baby so bad, adopt one that would starve to death in their mother's arms if you don't. My God, have mercy. Please grow up and show up and look at the math. Moreover, let me get to the whole second tier, just as important of what we're not doing right is raising our children with gentleness and kindness and compassion and intelligence and reason. I know when my first education of how parents are doing it wrong and how a mother shouldn't have been thanked was when I was a child, and my next door neighbor boys uh, were frequently showing me and my sisters and parents their new set of bruises. I knew some kids in my neighborhood. It was a typical middle class neighborhood, and the dad in that family had a good job. The mother stayed home with the kids, as was typical in that backward time. But man, those kids, it was one of the most common experiences of my childhood to see fresh bruises on their torsos, legs, and so forth. The dad and the mother were beating those children constantly. So that's when I questioned that thing about honor thy parents in the Ten Commandments in the Christian Bible. Why would anybody honor parents who beat their children black and blue constantly? It doesn't make any sense. Then you got your pedophiles. As a psychologist and with a specialty in behavioral medicine and a person who's done a lot of formal and actually more informal counseling from people who just tell me their problems and horrify me, and then I try to dry their tears and lift their chin and help them somehow. I have heard a whole heck of a lot about both males and females being sexually abused by both their parents, one or the other or both. And it's disgusting to me that this sort of thing happens on this world. Often step parents are involved, or boyfriends or girlfriends of the biological parent, and I want to puke when I hear these stories about sexual abuse that is experienced during childhood. No one should have to endure that. It's abhorrent, and it is a black mark on our species as a whole. You can't say a species is the highest form of life on the planet when members of it rape their children. You can't. And then there's the whole extremely bad idea, extremely bad reasons for having children tier of argument that I'm making here. I know a guy in Los Angeles, California. I've known this guy for 20 years, and he went from being a bright eyed, bushy tailed young creative genius to being one of the most bitter, corrupt, unconscionable criminals I have ever had the misfortune now of knowing. And I saw this whole descent into hell that his personality and his soul made, and it causes me to cry for him. And I think he's one of the most disgusting human beings I've ever encountered in my life now, instead of this incredible creative genius that he used to be when he was bright and shiny and new and innocent. When he was innocent, now he got what he wanted. He wanted money, and he at times actually has some. But he says he's spent as much as $100 a day on cocaine and other drugs, and boy, that must cost a lot. And he got himself into the mafia, which has caused him to very narrowly miss losing his life repeatedly. And it gets worse. That guy has generated victims for the mob. He told me in May of, I think, 2020. two. Maybe getting that year wrong, but a year or two ago, this guy who used to be the sweetest thing uh, told me that in a long interim in which we didn't speak or see one another, he had paid three women, excuse me, three women uh, to generate children for him. He said that he had three children now. And I was astonished and expressed dismay and said, why would you do that? Why are you paying essentially surrogate wombs to have babies for you? And isn't that kind of like the ultimate form of prostitution? Isn't that kind of like the ultimate form of prostitution on their part to not only be having sex with you, but to be for money, but to be producing babies for you for money? What do you want with all these kids? And he said that in his Hollywood mafia, whatever the heck that thing is, you get higher status if you breed for them and basically create new victims that they can recruit. How how the gang doesn't have to go outside the gang to get new recruits now. They're trained and groomed from childhood to be slaves, to be greedy, unconscionable, heartless slaves. But it gets worse from there. And I'm so sorry. Don't shoot the messenger. Do not shoot the messenger. I'm just repeating what that guy said to me. My former genius friend, who is now a victim generator, he said that sometimes in his big Hollywood movie gang, they ask protection questions, and they ask a dad if he would uh, give his life for his child, or would he give the child's life in exchange for his own. They ask protection questions, and I'm pointing this out loud and in person, and I'm telling you to your face, this is what happens here. Um, and they ask people who are in to choose between lives. That guy who told me he's paying women to breed for him, um, I didn't mention the gender side. Incidentally, he does DNA tests on the children when they're in the womb, and he said he was forcing the women he's paying to abort female children because you get higher status if you have sons than if you have daughters. So he's actually uh, made these women get abortions only because they were carrying female children. That's called gendercide. And it's happening right now, right here in River City. It is happening in America, not just in China and other places. They're killing female fetuses because they're female, and that's the only reason. But when you consider that they would just be kind of like cannon fodder, according to this guy, the way this guy thinks, uh, you know, bless their hearts, at least they didn't make it out of the womb alive and have to be used this way. This guy told me on the phone the last time we spoke, which will be the last time we speak, believe me, um, that when his mafia dons come around and he is asked to choose between his life and one of the lives of his sons, he has three, count him three now, lives to choose instead of his own. You heard me correctly. This guy has paid women to produce male children for him, not because he wants to be a dad or thinks that the world needs more male children in Los Angeles, but because he wants to have someone to finger for death when his boss comes around and asks him whether he would choose the life of his child or the life of, or his own life. So inadvertently, all those people who got all teary eyed and naive and innocent and you know filling the world basically with balderdash and BS last night, thinking all the mommies of the world. Did you just inadvertently think three slave generators for this guy? Those people getting their Oscars last night, thinking all the mothers of the world for being mothers, just accidentally thanked three women who generated for hire babies out of their loins for the sole purpose of them being sacrificed. If they're the guy that paid them to generate the baby victims was ever asked to choose between the life of his children or the life of his self. And then you get to the Lebensborn thing. Let me shift to a whole different type of mafia, and let's talk about Lebensborn. Lebensborn was a program, if you don't know, and many of you will, uh, established by Adolf Hitler during World War II, and he was paying and housing all kinds of people to generate babies for his eugenics program. And some horrible experiments took place, and some of the same Nazi doctors who were um, experimenting on victims in the concentration camps. We're running a eugenics program called Lebensborn, Lebensborn, and Hitler and the Nazis were breeding people on purpose, trying to find the right uh, DNA to generate what Hitler called Ubermann and Uberfrau, Superman and Superwoman, alpha male, alpha female. He was trying to breed uh, stronger, smarter humans without natural selection coming into play. And so women and men entered into this program. On some of them were probably victimized, some of them were probably essentially enslaved, but a lot of white supremacist Nazis went into this program on purpose, out loud, in person, and went in and consciously, willingly bred babies for Hitler. And a lot of those babies didn't make it out of the maternity. Listen to me. A lot of those babies didn't even make it out of the maternity wards alive, because within the first day or two of their lives, they were killed by the doctors and nurses in the maternity wards, because their face wasn't just perfect, or their skin color wasn't pale enough, or it looked like maybe they were going to have dark hair, or you know they were breeding babies to look like me, essentially white and blonde, and to have really high IQs and be very articulate and be very strong and so forth. So if you didn't look right, and they would literally measure things like the width of your forehead, or the distance between the top of your head and your chin, and they would measure babies. If the baby was too small, they would kill it. If it went down, please listen to me, it went down to interpupillary distance. They would measure the distance between the center of the pupils of the eyes on a baby. And if it was too wide, they killed the baby. If it was too narrow, they killed the baby. There was a range within. The baby was going to have an acceptable interpupillary distance. You gonna think a mother like that? Well, I got some really bizarre news. Long after Hitler's reign ended in Germany and Western Europe and the rest of the world, long after the 40s had ended. Lebensborn clinics experiments continued, and they continued on the soil of countries other than Germany. And from what I can tell, the Lebensborn program is still extant. So I know I'm sitting here watching the Academy Awards last night while people who don't think as broadly and as deeply as I do apparently thank all the mothers of the world. They inadvertently thanked people so appallingly unconscionable that they would breed in a eugenics program perpetuating Adolf Hitler's legacy on this planet. So you got your babies starving to death, even while those fantastically wealthy people talking about how this movie cost millions of dollars, this movie cost $1 billion. Babies starved to death in their starving mother's arms while those movies were made. Babies starved to death while some actress puts on a 25,000. Listen to me! Babies starved to death while some actress puts on a $25,000 diamond necklace for the Academy Awards, while some actor puts on a $6,000 suit, while some movie theater brags about how their most recent movie, for which they just won several Oscars, cost millions and even $1 billion or more dollars. And the maldistribution of wealth on this planet is one of the most profoundly and unjust things on this world. While babies starve to death, we shouldn't be making any more babies ever at all until we feed the ones we've got. And point of fact, maybe some of those actresses will sell their stupidly expensive jewelry and their absurdly expensive gowns and use the proceeds to donate to UNICEF or some kind of organization that's going to feed starving babies so that the actresses don't have a bunch of fancy, stupid jewelry and absurdly expensive clothing while babies starve and don't have, the rest of us aren't completely insulted by them thanking all the mothers of the world, some of which are breeding mafia slaves to serve as sacrificial. God, I can't believe this planet. I can't believe Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens is bad seed. And then you got your Lebensborn victim generators. You've got other contexts in which people are breeding for all the wrong reasons. It makes those people who used to have a whole bunch of children just so they'd have enough hands to work the farm seem like well intentioned. People used to have a whole bunch of kids just so that they'd have enough help around the agricultural complex they grew up on. No, babies should be wanted. Babies should be fed. Babies should not be produced in order to be sacrificed. If some mafia don comes around and asks you whether you're going to give your children's lives or your own, babies should not be produced at the behest, however belatedly, of Adolf Hitler. And I want to take you Hollywood people to task because you have utterly and absolutely no right to thank all the mothers of the world, because if it weren't for mothers, we wouldn't be here. You need to see mothers as the ultimate victim generators. Mothers are victim generators on this world. And what's about to happen, you mark my words, what's about to happen. on this world within the next, I'd say, 40 to 50 years is that practically everybody ever born is going to wish they hadn't been. What's happening to this planet is not going to go away. And yes, what is happening to this planet is absolutely of human design. The monster storms, the earthquakes, even are directly related to climate change. How could climate change be starting earthquakes 9.0 included? Easy. I understood this when I was in elementary school in the 1960s because I was raised military intelligence and I had really good science teachers. And I was actually studying things like tectonics and what's called math. And it was in the annals of climate change uh, science, even decades ago, that when you melt the polar ice caps, then all that water, which used to be at the North or South Pole, all the that was frozen, is now water, which because of centrifugal force is going to gravitate toward the equator, which is going to put unusual pressure against the tectonic plates that are at the equator. Because keep in mind, the world is always the world is always in a relationship between gravity being pulled toward the sun and centrifugal force that's trying to fling it out into space, right? So we're always doing this dance between being pulled toward the sun and being flung out into space. So this planet is always wobbling. It's got a little wobble. It's called a resonance. And a 9.0 earthquake in Chile years ago actually knocked the poles of the earth out of alignment slightly. A climate changed a climate change caused earthquake almost knocked the earth out of its wobble, which is delicate and very precious, which would have sent the earth pummeling toward the sun or spinning out into space. You people need to actually pay attention in science class. And I'm telling you the God's honest truth. If people were actually paying attention in science class, nobody would ever argue that humans cause climate change, and nobody would be all that thrilled about having more babies. Because if you look at the ultimate source of virtually all the human caused problems on this world, overpopulation is at the very core of all those layers of reasons. So, you Academy Award winners, you were all so beautiful, and you were all so precious, and you were all so shiny bright, and you were all so talented and creative, and yada yada yada. And every single one of you who had the audacity to thank all the mothers of the world should be ashamed of yourselves and actually get a clue. Yeah, think, win that, win your own reason. I gotta